I felt his breath against my neck, warm and deliberate, as we stood in the storage room surrounded by boxes of donated items. The charity gala was in full swing just beyond the door, but here, in this quiet space, everything had shifted between us. His fingers traced along my shoulder, and I knew there was no going back. What started as volunteer work had become something I never expected, something that would change everything. Hey, if you're enjoying this so far, take a quick second to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and trust me, I won't want to miss what happens next. The evening had started innocently enough. I'd been volunteering at charity events for years, but this gala was different. The venue was elegant, filled with influential people writing generous checks, and the cause, supporting local shelters, was close to my heart. I'd arrived, early to help with setup, my hair pulled back in a simple style, wearing a classic black dress that was professional, yet flattering. That's when I met Kai. He was arranging auction items when I walked in, his movements efficient and purposeful. Tall, with dark hair that caught the light and an easy confidence that drew attention without trying. When he looked up and smiled, something stirred in my chest that had nothing to do with charity work. "You must be Lauren," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Kai. They told me you'd be coordinating the silent auction." His handshake was firm, lasting just a moment longer than necessary. I felt the calluses on his palms, evidence of hands that did real work, and found myself wondering what other talents those hands possessed. "That's me," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thanks for helping tonight. These events are always hectic." We worked side by side for the next hour, our conversations flowing naturally from the logistics of the event to our shared passion for the cause. I learned he'd been volunteering at the shelter for 2 years, that he worked in construction but spent his free time giving back. There was something genuine about him, a depth that made me want to know more. As guests began arriving, we found ourselves stealing glances across the room. When he'd catch me looking, that smile would appear again, sending warmth spreading through. Me that had nothing to do with the crowded venue. The gala itself was a success. Donations were pouring in, the auction was raising significant funds, and the energy in the room was electric. But I found myself increasingly distracted by Kai's presence. The way he moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, how he listened intently when donors shared their stories, the gentle way he guided an elderly woman to her table. During dinner, we were seated at the volunteer table, and somehow ended up next to each other. His leg brushed against mine under the table, and neither of us moved away. The contact sent little sparks up my spine, making it difficult to focus on the speeches being given. "You're really passionate about this work," he said quietly, leaning close so I could hear him over the applause. "It matters," I replied, turning to face him. Our faces were inches apart now, and I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. These people deserve better than what they've been given. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition of shared values that went deeper than surface attraction. "You're remarkable," he said softly. Heat rose in my cheeks, and I looked down at my hands. "I just do what I can." His fingers found mine under the table, intertwining briefly before releasing. The simple touch left my skin tingling. As the evening progressed, we found excuses to work together, checking on auction items, helping guests find their tables, coordinating with the catering staff. Each interaction was charged with an undercurrent of tension that grew stronger with every shared look, every accidental touch. It was near the end of the evening when everything changed. The gala was winding down, guests were saying their goodbyes, and volunteers were beginning the cleanup process. I was in the storage room behind the main hall, sorting through leftover auction materials, when Kai appeared in the doorway. "Need help?" he asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. The room was small, filled with boxes and supplies, lit only by a single overhead bulb that cast everything in warm, intimate shadows. Suddenly, the space felt charged with possibility. "Think I can manage," I said, but my voice came out breathier than intended. He moved closer, ostensibly to help with a heavy box, but when he reached around me, his body pressed against my back. I could feel his warmth, smell his cologne mixed with something purely masculine. My breath caught. "Lauren," he said quietly, his voice rough with something I recognized as desire. I turned in the circle of his arms, and suddenly we were face to face, mere inches apart. The air between us crackled with tension that had been building all evening. "We shouldn't," I whispered, even as my hands found their way to his chest. "Probably not," he agreed, but his hands were settling on my waist, drawing me closer, and then his lips were on mine, soft and insistent, and all my rational thoughts scattered. The kiss was everything I'd been imagining since we met, passionate, hungry, full of promise. My hands tangled in his hair as he pressed me back against the wall, his body solid and warm against mine. His mouth moved to my neck, finding that sensitive spot that made me gasp. "You've been driving me crazy all night," he murmured against my skin. Good, I breathed, tilting my head to give him better access. Because you've been doing the same to me. His hands roamed over my dress, mapping the curves of my body with reverent touches. When his fingers found the zipper at my back, I didn't stop him. The dress slipped from my shoulders, pooling at my feet, leaving me in just my undergarments in the dim light of the storage room. His eyes swept over me with an appreciation that made me feel beautiful, desired. "You're incredible," he said, his voice thick with want. I reached for him, my fingers working at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel his skin against mine. When the fabric fell away, I ran my hands over his chest, feeling the strength there, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He lifted me onto a nearby table, settling between my legs, his hands gentle but insistent as they explored my body. Every touch sent fire through my veins, building a heat that threatened to consume me entirely. "Are you sure?" he asked, his forehead resting against mine, giving me the chance to say no, even though every line of his body spoke of barely restrained desire. Instead of words, I answered by pulling him closer, capturing his lips in another, searing kiss. I felt him smile against my mouth before he deepened the connection, his hands moving with purposeful intent. What followed was a dance as old as time but felt entirely new with him. He touched me like I was precious, something to be cherished, even as passion threatened to overwhelm us both. My hands explored the planes of his back, feeling the muscles shift under my touch as we moved together in perfect synchronization. The world outside the storage room ceased to exist. There was only us, only this moment, only the incredible sensation of being completely connected to another person. His lips found mine again and again, swallowing my soft sounds of pleasure, murmuring words of encouragement and desire. When release finally claimed us both, it was with an intensity that left me shaking in his arms. He held me close, his breathing ragged, his forehead pressed against mine, as we both tried to process what had just happened. "Wow," I whispered when I could finally speak. He chuckled softly, the sound vibrating through his chest where I was pressed against him. "That's one word for it." Reality began to creep back in as we reluctantly separated, reaching for our discarded clothes. The sounds of the cleanup continuing outside reminded us that we'd been gone longer than we should have. "We should get back," I said, though every part of me wanted to stay in this intimate bubble we'd created. "Yeah," he agreed, but his hands lingered as he helped me straighten my dress, his touch gentle and caring. We emerged from the storage room separately, rejoining the cleanup efforts as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I was hyper-aware of his presence across the room, the way he moved, the way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching. The volunteer coordinator was wrapping up, thanking everyone for their hard work, announcing the total amount raised. It had been a successful evening by every measure, but I could barely focus on the numbers. My mind kept replaying what had happened between Kai and me, the feel of his hands on my skin, the way he'd looked at me like I was something extraordinary. As people began to leave, Kai approached me one final time. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral for anyone who might be listening. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit by streetlights that cast long shadows between the cars. We walked in comfortable silence until we reached my car, and then turned to face each other. "About what happened," he began, his expression serious. My heart sank, thinking he was about to say it was a mistake, that we should forget it ever happened. "I don't want you to think it was just..." He paused, searching for words. "You're not just some hookup to me, Lauren. Tonight meant something." Relief flooded through me. "For me, too," I admitted. He stepped closer, his hand reaching up to cup my cheek. "I'd like to see you again, outside of volunteer work." "I'd like that," I said, leaning into his touch. He leaned down and kissed me again, softer this time, but no less meaningful. When we broke apart, he smiled that smile that had captured my attention from the beginning. "I'll call you," he promised. "You better," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. I drove home in a daze, my body still humming from his touch, my mind spinning with possibilities. What had started as a simple volunteer evening had become something unexpected, something that promised to change my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The next morning brought doubt. In the harsh light of day, what had seemed so right the night before suddenly felt complicated. We were volunteers for the same organization, which meant we'd continue to see each other at events. What if things didn't work out between us? What if it became awkward? What if people found out what had happened in that storage room? I was second-guessing everything when my phone rang. Kai's name appeared on the screen, and my heart jumped. "Hi," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Morning." His voice was warm, intimate. "Sleep well?" "Eventually," I admitted, and heard him chuckle. "Listen, I know last night was unexpected, and I don't want you to feel pressured about anything, but I meant what I said. I'd really like to take you to dinner." His honesty disarmed me. "I'd like that too," This is complicated, because of the volunteer work, among other things. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. We don't have to tell anyone anything. We can take this as slowly as you want. But Lauren, I don't want to pretend last night didn't happen, and I don't want to miss the chance to see where this could go. His words settled something in my chest. Okay, I said. Dinner sounds good. Tonight? I laughed at his eagerness. Someone's impatient. When you know what you want, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We made plans to meet at a quiet restaurant across town, somewhere we were unlikely to run into other volunteers. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was smiling, the doubts from earlier fading in the face of his straightforward honesty. That evening, as I got ready for our date, I thought about the previous night, how a simple volunteer commitment had led to something I never expected. How sometimes the best things in life came when you weren't looking for them, when you were focused on helping others and accidentally found someone who wanted to help you too. I chose a simple dress, nothing too fancy, and met him at the restaurant. When I saw him waiting for me, my heart did that little jump again. He looked good in casual clothes, relaxed and confident, and when he smiled at me, I felt that same spark from the night before. Dinner was easy, comfortable conversation flowing as naturally as it had during our volunteer work. We talked about our lives, our goals, our shared commitment to making a difference. There was substance beneath the attraction, a foundation that promised something real. So, he said as we shared dessert, about our little secret. What about it? I like having something that's just ours, he said, his eyes meeting mine across the table. At least for now. For now, I agreed, understanding that eventually we'd have to figure out how to navigate this relationship within our volunteer community. But for tonight, it was enough to just be together. He walked me to my car again, and this time when he kissed me goodnight, it was with the promise of more to come. As I drove home, I thought about how quickly things could change, how one night of volunteer work could lead to something unexpected and wonderful. Over the following weeks, we developed a rhythm. We'd see each other at volunteer events, maintaining professional distance but stealing glances when no one was looking. We'd have dinner afterward, sometimes at his place, sometimes mine, always talking long into the night about everything and nothing. The physical attraction between us only grew stronger. Every stolen moment, every secret touch, every private smile added to the building tension between us. When we were alone, we couldn't keep our hands off each other, making up for the restraint we had to show in public. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event, we found ourselves back in my apartment, the pretense of casual dinner abandoned as soon as the door closed behind us. His hands were on me immediately, pulling me close, his mouth finding mine with familiar hunger. I've been thinking about this all evening, he murmured against my lips. Just this evening? I teased, my fingers already working at the buttons of his shirt. Every minute since I met you, he corrected, lifting me easily and carrying me to the bedroom. What followed was even more intense than that first night in the storage room. Without the urgency and risk of discovery, we could take our time, exploring each other thoroughly, learning what made the other gasp and sigh with pleasure. Afterward, as we lay tangled together in my bed, I realized that what had started as attraction had deepened into something more substantial. This wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, mental, a connection that went beyond the surface. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "This," I said honestly. "Us, how we're going to handle it." "What do you mean?" "People are going to notice eventually, the way we look at each other, the way we work together. Someone's going to figure it out." He was quiet for a moment, considering. Would that be so bad? I don't know. I've never dated someone I work with before, even volunteer work. We could transfer to different organizations, he suggested. Keep doing charity work, but not together. The thought of not working alongside him anymore made my chest tight. I don't want that. I like what we do together. I like how we make a difference as a team. Then we figure it out, he said simply. We're both adults. We can handle whatever challenges come up. His confidence was reassuring, but I still worried. What if it doesn't work out between us? What if we break up and then it's awkward at every event? He turned to face me fully, his expression serious. Lauren, I can't promise we'll never have problems, but I can promise that I'll always respect you, always treat you well, whether we're together or not. Can you promise me the same? I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the maturity that had drawn me to him in the first place. Yes, I said, I can promise that. Then we'll be fine, he said, leaning down to kiss me softly. Whatever happens, we'll handle it, together. Lying there in his arms, I realized he was right. We were both committed to the volunteer work for the right reasons, both mature enough to handle a relationship like adults. The connection we'd found was worth the potential complications. Over the next few months, we gradually became more open about our relationship, not announcing it exactly, but not hiding it either. We'd arrive at events together sometimes, work as a team naturally, let people draw their own conclusions. Most of our fellow volunteers were supportive when they figured it out. A few even admitted they'd suspected something was developing between us. The organization's leadership had no issues, as long as it didn't interfere with our work, which it never did. If anything, we were more effective together than apart. The storage room where it all began became a sort of inside joke between us. Whenever we passed it at events, we'd share a meaningful look, remembering that first night when everything changed. Think anyone knows? I asked him one evening as we worked late setting up for another gala. Knows what? He replied innocently, but his eyes were dancing with mischief. That we christened half the storage spaces in this building. He laughed, pulling me close for a quick kiss. Our little secret. But it wasn't really a secret anymore, and that was okay. What had started as a forbidden attraction in a charity storage room had evolved into something real, something lasting. We'd found love while trying to help others, discovered that sometimes the best things in life come when you're focused on giving, rather than getting. As I looked around at the gala setup, thinking about all the good we were doing together, all the lives we were helping to change, I realized that night in the storage room had changed more than just my love life. It had shown me what it meant to find a true partner, someone who shared your values and your passion for making the world better. Sometimes volunteer work gives you more than you give it. Sometimes helping others leads you to help yourself find exactly what you didn't know you were looking for. Have you ever found love in an unexpected place? What would you do if a simple volunteer night changed everything? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing your stories. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe for more. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.